So we're back working on this Ford Fusion for a potential parasitic draw. The customers have been battling with the battery going dead. Dropped it off yesterday and I noticed the manual override switch for the interior lights was on. But I'm checking for a parasitic draw before I'm disconnecting the battery. Now I got an amp clamp in here and it's graphing about 150 milliamps. And I got another amp clamp meter that's showing 165 milliamps. So I'm going to check for voltage drops across fuses. But first and foremost, I'm going to unplug his iPhone charger that's in there. See how much of a draw that causes. So that only was about 10 milliamps by the looks of it. Didn't change anything unless there's something else plugged in that I'm not aware of. So I'm going to check some voltage drops across fuses. So I tested voltage drop across all the mini fuses that are accessible here, and none show a voltage drop. I've opened the doors and tripped the latches. Now I'm waiting for the BCM to go to sleep again. It's roughly 600 milliamps on the graphing meter and 560, 550 on the amp clamp, the two amp clamps. I don't want to disconnect the battery and put an ammeter in series because obviously that reboots modules, and there could be a module that's hung, but it isn't on any of these mini fuses. So I'm waiting for this thing to time out so I can go into underneath the dash and look at fuses. So I brought the meter inside the cab of the vehicle because accessing these fuses up in here is not pleasant. I checked the first two rows for voltage drops and I can't see anything, but I'm having difficulty getting a good connection on them. So I'm going to pull the fuses one at a time. I accidentally hit the trunk release button and re-woke up the BCM, so I got to wait for it to go to sleep again. The draw that I'm measuring is about 140 to 150. There it is. Now it's the BCM's gone to sleep. Amp clamp may have drifted a little bit. It's 170 milliamps. Yeah, it's drifted a little bit. So after zeroing the amp clamp, it's drawing about 130 to 140, but there's a digital spike in there as if a module is pinging the network. You can see it. So I pulled every fuse under there and none of them made a difference. So I'm going to go back to the fuse panel under the hood and pull some of the big fuses out. So if I pull this 40 amp J case fuse out of here, which is fuse number 61, no 19, 18, 19, 20, 18, 19, fuse 19, the draw goes away. But then when I plug it back in, the BCM wakes up. So I'm going to give it a chance to time out again. So that J case fuse 19, 40 amp, feeds the Smart Junction Box, which is basically the BCM. And it could be acting up. There's lots of cases on Identifix for parasitic draws caused by a problem with the Smart Junction Box. First and foremost, it says check for signs of corrosion, but there's no sunroof on this thing and it's never been flooded that I know of. It's a local car. I pulled all the fuses in there, but that fuse is direct feed to the Smart Junction Box, so there could be something in there that's causing it. I'm going to look at some cases. So it's back down to 130 milliamps, and if I pull this 40 amp fuse out, if I could, I had some relay pliers and I lost them. It drops to 19 milliamps, but when I plug it back in, the BCM wakes up, or the Smart Junction Box wakes up, and the draw goes back to 600 milliamps, 650 milliamps for another 10 minutes, and then it'll time out and drop down to 130. So I put my battery disconnect switch on the negative cable there, and I've got a real ammeter connected in series in the circuit now. Got tired of re-zeroing the amp clamp, and after about 5 minutes it drops down to 145 milliamps, which is what the amp clamp was reading. And it appears to be something in the battery junction box, smart junction box, sorry, appears to be something in the smart junction box. So I unplugged a connector at the junction box up here. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it up there, but I got a connector unplugged, and it's dropped down to 3 milliamps. So I'm going to see if I can figure out which wire on that connector has got the current flow. So there's about 5 connectors at the Smart Junction Box, but 2 of them that look the same. And this one is BU, I gather that'd be blue, and this one's gray, so I'm taking this one to be the connector. I could tell by the colors of the wires in the connector view, but I'm pretty sure this is 2280D. So we're gonna take some insulation off of it and see if we can put an amp clamp on each individual wire, plug it back in. So it turns out I blew the 10 amp fuse in my multimeter when I unplugged that connector. So it wasn't actually 3 milliamps. So I gotta basically start over again. So I've identified the wire coming in. Pin 4 comes from fuse 19. And I've got the amp clamp over that wire, and it reads 150 milliamps roughly. And I'm reading 146 on the ammeter. This thing, I'm pretty sure, is going to need a smart junction box, but I'm thinking of a temporary solution, putting a toggle switch on that circuit. So the parasitic draw is caused by the circuit going into pin 4 of this connector here, connector 2280A, which is a brown connector under the dash. So I've located that wire, which is blue, brown, and orange. See, on here it says orange, but it's brown and orange. And I've cut the wire, put a toggle switch in it temporarily. So if the customer needs to leave this vehicle sitting for any length of time and turn the switch off. And that'll prevent killing the battery, and more convenient than putting a battery charger on it every night. I'm going to let it time out now and see what we got for a parasitic draw with the switch off. I think I blew the fuse in my meter again. I just had the switch off. So it's 600 milliamps. It'll take about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. It's 1:46 p.m. for this to drop down. We'll see what happens when that happens. So it's dropped down to 150 milliamps, which is like a side marker light bulb on. And if I turn this toggle switch off, it drops down to 30. So anything under 50 is acceptable, in my opinion anyways. So we're going to let it go like that. Of course, if we turn this switch on, we're back up to 700 milliamps. And we got to wait for the timer to time out. Drops down to 600. And then it'll drop down to 150. But if we turn this off, that's interesting. Turn the switch off here. And it's up to 495. Let's see what happens after the rest of the body control module. There's multiple power inputs to that BCM, or Smart Junction Box, whatever you want to call it. So after about 2 minutes, it drops down to 30 milliamps. So we're going to put the battery cable back to normal again, and call this one a wrap for now. We're going to look into a possible used Smart Junction Box, but I'm not sure if he's going to want to do that.